We think this is a very interesting topic. We think it's still a bit underexplored and seemingly niche, but we hope that in this hour we'll show you that it's actually very important. And yeah, of course, like we're also very happy we got to cover this topic on a Pride Month. So thank you for everyone who like joins us in celebrating it. And I guess now, without further ado, I'm gonna introduce our two amazing speakers. So first is Dr. Lee Miller, Deputy Chair of Queer World and CEO of Values Driven AI. Her work focuses on helping organizations use AI in ways that are grounded in their values, and she's also contributing to the development of European standards for evaluating bias under the EU Act. Our other speaker is Beckett Leclerc, Head of Technology at Five Rights, an organization working to ensure children's rights are respected in the digital world. Beckett brings expertise in technology policy, cybersecurity, and machine learning, with a particular focus on creating technology that serves all young people in their diversity. So yeah, thank you both for being here today, and we're really looking forward to hearing your perspectives. And I guess I will now pass the voice on to Beckett, who will start.
Yes, thank you. Let me just start sharing. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, hi again, everyone. I'm Beckett. As said, I focus on the rights of young people in the digital environment. Therefore, I've been invited to very quickly speak about the intersections of youth and LGBTQ plus identity in the context of that thing we call AI today. So let's clear up something important right from the beginning. Sometimes when I talk about supporting children online, people jump to assumptions, and to be honest, I can understand why in many cases. So phrases like, oh, but think of the children are often tossed around to mean really whatever the speaker wants them to mean. And historically, this has been leveraged to harm marginalized groups, particularly LGBTQ plus community. And as a queer person, I've also been at the receiving end of this. But I dedicate my time now to children's rights and interests, as those are enshrined in international rights instruments, most notably the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which covers everything from safety to privacy, freedom from exploitation, good education, right to identity and culture, and all those beyond things as well. And children's rights apply to children in all their diversity, including LGBTQ plus children. And importantly, non-discrimination is one of those very, very core principles underlying the UN Convention. And the Commission on the Rights of the Child has even stated, as I've put on the screen here, that culture cannot really excuse or justify perpetuation of certain values that deny children the rights they're guaranteed by the Convention. So really there's no excuse for discrimination. Another key right all children are owed is the right to have their views listened to and lent due weight in every matter that affects them. Children are, human beings with thoughts worth listening to, but we often discard their views as unpolished or not credible, and that somewhat mirrors, I think, similar struggles queer people have faced over the years, with the issues compounding for queer youth at the middle of that. So I would argue that simply saying, think of the children, though, is not good enough. We must think with the children. So here are some findings from prior youth consultation work I've been involved in on this topic. So much of what youth have said in these consultations focused on how they feel harmed. So they talk about AI that made them feel out of place, algorithms that pushed homophobic, transphobic content to them online. So a couple of full quotes I put here are quite powerful. So AI challenges the online and mental safety of all teens and children, but especially that of minorities, including LGBTQI plus young people. And with the majority of the population being heterosexual and cisgender, there's a huge chance for AI to be biased in regards to LGBTQI plus people, specifically children and teens. So these statements were indicative not of a sheltered and weak outgroup that doesn't know anything, but of profound understanding from human beings with human thoughts and agency. And more importantly, perhaps, they had some ideas for what we could be doing better and the ways that they felt AI might help them. They said future AI tools could be used in ways to increase their sense of pride, to help them stay social, to engage with more inclusive sexuality and gender education that's free from maybe the potential emotional spin or awkwardness of traditional sex education. They imagined AI could support them in communicating and sharing online content, and that could have positive impacts on their self-esteem and mental health. As for the current state of AI, youth have also proposed some useful mitigations like more careful output monitoring and more effective filtering that accounts for queer lives. So we needn't be technophobic here. We needn't shut children out of opportunity so long as we can sufficiently mitigate the risk. And that goes the same for LGBT plus children as well. So there are hypothetical use cases that could promote the rights of children when they're done responsibly. For instance, optimized resource distribution for gender affirming care that could hypothetically support the right to a good standard of health. Responsible restoration of degraded footage of queer ancestors could uphold things like rights to culture and education, for instance. Involving youth in data trusts could give them power and agency over the data concerning them and their identity, perhaps supporting the right to freedom from exploitation. But on the flip side, I think we also sometimes need to take a step back from this what if-ism about AI and reflect on what goes wrong and what systems are already inflicted. So things like algorithmic outing, data exploitation, surveillance, loss of life in some circumstances. And we need to learn from this so it never happens again. And using AI responsibly means understanding its limitations and when to say stop, as well as realizing when to push on the opportunities it can bring. But better yet, why don't we just ask ourselves what LGBT plus children are saying? We know they're already organizing online. They have strong and varied opinions about their future and the role AI can play in it. Part of upholding their rights is, after all, taking what they have to say into account. And I think there's a huge and relatively untapped opportunity for civil society and particularly organizations that work with youth and youth rights here, simply just by listening and involving them in non-tokenistic ways throughout the life cycle of any system or idea. And I'm delighted to tell you that there are resources already out there that can help. So first of all, the Children in AI Design Code was designed by a coalition of technologists, legal experts, rights advocates, child development experts, academics, but perhaps most importantly, young people themselves in all their diversity. And it seeks out a process to identify, evaluate, mitigate the known risks of AI to children and prepare for the question marks. So it requires those building and deploying systems to consider foreseeable risks to all children in all their diversity by design and default. As part of that, it recommends doing specific risk and impact assessments for the groups of children likely to be interfacing with the system. So here's a key opportunity to drill down into the potential risks and opportunities that manifest differently for those groups which are often underheard as part of the development process and for whom risks can accrue disproportionately. There's also international technical standards that can support organizations to develop with children's rights in mind, where their products or services are likely to have an impact upon diverse groups of youth. One such example I put on the slide is IEEE 2089. An important thing to note about age-appropriate design here is that it acknowledges the diversity of paths child development can take and the developing capacity of each child. It does not mean just providing a blanket service that treats all minors as the same. I'm also very excited to let you know I'm currently chairing the development of a new standard at IEEE which will concern AI systems impacting children. I really can't emphasize enough how much the queer youth voice matters. The queer community has a history of being categorized and defined in ways against our will, and that legacy is set to continue if we follow the current trends of technocracy, datification, and classification. The history of queerphobic bias can be repeated and amplified by algorithmic technologies. Technology has been and still is being weaponized to quash out marginalized groups, even while they're still young. But it doesn't have to be that way, and as youth are our future, they are some of the best placed to tell us what that future could and should be. And as people in NGOs and non-profits, each of us here has a part we can play in making things better. So I'll leave you with a final thought for now, in that anti-queer rhetoric is at a fever pitch around the world, amplified, normalized through some of the most pervasive algorithmic systems in our lives. Children see this, and many children say now that they rarely disconnect from social media in their daily life. They are increasingly subject to algorithmic exploitation and manipulation every day, and combining that with the level of anti-queer mobilization we already see means it's incredibly precarious to be an LGBTQ plus child in what many people are now calling the AI era. But at the same time, the queer community has a long history of reclaiming things once weaponized against it. So please don't just think of the children. We can all refuse to be passive bystanders, just thinking about things or being maybe too nervous to engage with topics of children's rights in the digital environment. we can use the skills and tools we have to help build a digital world that LGBTQ plus children and all children really deserve. And many of these changes do benefit the entire queer community with its many beautifully diverse intersections. And yes, that includes all of us as adults as well. It's not really through moving fast and breaking things that society improves, but through making things better bit by bit for those who will come after us. Thank you. That's end of my slides.
Thank you so much, Becca. That was a really topical presentation, and I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have your questions, please keep them for now, or you can, if you are scared you're gonna forget them, you can just put them in the chat. But as I mentioned before, there's gonna be a designated Q&A session after. But right now, I would like to pass the voice to Lee, who will have her 10 minutes presentation now.
Can you guys see my screen? Oh,
Yes.
great. Oh, thanks, Beckett. That was a good, it's good that you're coming from the design perspective. I used to be an AI product manager. So I was working with a tech company that was making AI products. And then last year I left, I started my own company. So this is kind of 5 slides about kind of what I do as a combination of having my own company and sitting as the deputy chair of the board of an organization called Queer World based in Norway. And this question, how can we make an AI policy that's ethical? That was not that like even that question was not really accepted by everyone. So this is a pretty political process that we started last year. Queer World is yeah, I'm very, very proud of it. On the left-hand side, this little map on the left-hand side is Norway, very long country. It is not warm. Sorry, I'm a little bit jealous of you guys who are warm, even though I know that you're not warm. You're like all boiling alive, but it's not warm here right now. Anyway, so this is Norway. We have 4 chapters of Queer World, and then the other map, obviously, is of the world. And we're really proud to have members from all over the place. There's only a little bit more than 5 million people in Norway, and we have, I think, 1,700 members. We have 300 volunteers, 4 local chapters. And our target group is queer people with minority backgrounds or international backgrounds. And this is not a uniform group, right? Some people are like me, international, with all of like the white privilege of my face. And then we have lots of people who are asylum seekers and people who came from work and adoptees, students, and a lot of people who are born in Norway, raised in Norway, but with minority backgrounds, more visible minority backgrounds, maybe religious minority or being a person of color. And our goal is yeah, we work for a society where everyone can be who they are without experiencing discrimination. And we intentionally didn't say, without experiencing anti-queer discrimination, because we want to be intersectional. We want to have a very explicit anti-racist status. And Beckett mentioned the word he mentioned also working intersectionally. And these things connect and kind of impact you in multiple ways. So we're politically independent, we're religiously independent, we're autonomous, which is great, and we collaborate with all the other queer organizations in Norway. So, like Beckett said, there is a very clear anti-queer backlash internationally. At first, I wrote this and I was like, starting in the US, but I don't know if it started in the US, but at least it's kind of been traveling, eastward. And this is led in Norway, and maybe this is the same thing other NGOs around the world, but we're seeing kind of less like government funding and kind of shorter term government funding. At the same time, there's definitely more demand for our services, right? And there's definitely more demand for safe meeting spaces. That's like one of the core things that we do at Queer World is just building community spaces where you can come and be in the majority and get a free meal and just build a community with each other. And we're seeing more demand for mental health services, for outreach at asylum centers. Schools are asking us more, which is really good. Schools are asking us more for workshops. Even more demand, not more demand, but we're getting asked more to kind of give input to politicians because there's a lot of like right-wing kind of anti-queer things being pushed that they have to react to. So, given like we have less money, we have more to do, of course, why wouldn't you use this kind of thing called AI if this could really help everyone have an easier workday, right? So we could have last year, we meeting the board, we could have just written an AI policy in 2 weeks, right? And we could have followed best practices. Like here, I'm referring to ISO 42001, which is kind of the AI quality management standard. And we could have tailored it to an NGO. But I've worked in AI governance for 6 years, and that's kind of like the kiss of death of a policy, right? You just have an expert make it and you deliver it. But we could have said, okay, like no one can use their private ChatGPT accounts. You can't do that. Even volunteers, you can't use their private kind of AI accounts. And or we could have said, you have to go through data protection training, which data protection is really important for our membership group. But just the term data protection makes people fall asleep. But it's really important, right? Some people, it's not safe for them to be clear, or for them to be out, for example. So there's a lot of things we could do, and we decided to actually take it pretty slowly. So the first thing we did is we waited for a request. So AI was kind of on, it was on the radar of the board, but we waited until one of our local chapters actually came to the board and said, look, can we be using like ChatGPT to make images? Can we be using it to write meeting notes? Do we have any rules here? And we also waited until they're like, well, can you tell us this? Like, where should we go for knowledge? We waited until members themselves had like an acknowledged like gap and an acknowledged need for, or acknowledged kind of request for something else. And then we made a project team that was multidisciplinary. So there was someone from the board, there was a staff member, and then there was actually I took off my board hat and I put on my like corporate hat and I was like the AI expert. And we made that team of people who were interested but weren't known for having the strongest opinions in either direction. And that was kind of important because we could have picked the people who were really, really anti-AI, kind of the more creative types, or we could have picked the people, maybe like the board leader who was like, look, guys, we have to we have to get our reports out, we have to get our funding applications in, you know? So we kind of picked people who weren't known for having really strong opinions. And really key is we gathered anonymously, we gathered uses and we gathered concerns. And that was really important. We learned that 90% of people in the organization were using AI. 60% of them were using like shadow AI, like their personal accounts, which no one had any idea that that number would be so high. But that's a big issue when you're dealing with when you're dealing with an organization that has to have really like what's like iron strong whatever data protection, and when people are using their own personal accounts, then it's just a matter of time before the wrong document gets uploaded. And then we talked, and this sounds a bit stupid, but there's so much hype right now about AI. Like, what are we even, are we talking about generative AI? Are we talking about machine learning? Are we talking about chatbots that we just taught in like progressively larger groups, and we taught in ways that were interesting, I think, and that made people like safe to say that gave people safe spaces to say like, look, one more time about this thing. Like, so my spam filter in my email, is that ChatGPT, is that AI or not? And that was really because you can't we couldn't go on and like talk about dilemmas until we had like a common vocabulary about what it is we're talking about. So we focused on teaching, and then we just used the anonymous cases that we collected and we went through concrete dilemmas. I'll give an example on the next slide. And then we risk assessed, of course. So the concrete use cases that we collected that we thought, okay, these ones we think we actually need to we need to flag to the CEO. Then we sat with her and then we actually risk assess them. All right. And we use the existing risk assessment kind of procedure of the organization, but we tailored it to AI. And then we had in an entire organization meeting, we had this really intense, like 3 hour session, the yearly meeting, and we actually gathered input for the ethical AI policy following ISO 42001. That was something I kind of pushed for because I work with these kind of standards like Beck does. And that was just so we can kind of be really proud about having the first ethical AI policy that like follows really well-known governance procedures. So one example is okay, local chapters hold weekly queer cafes. So I'll just read out what's on the slide if you don't want to bother to read. And queer cafes are safe spaces to build community, like I said, to eat dinner, not have to spend money, and to be in the majority, which can be really nice to kind of alleviate like minority stress. And we discussed in groups, should we use a chatbot? Like we could just use a chatbot. We could use AI to automatically translate these invitation posts to queer cafes to like 17 new languages. Right? I mean, we have members and volunteers and staff from all over the world, but still we can't, there's still languages we don't speak, and not everyone coming here speaks Norwegian or English. Should we use these tools to translate to new languages? If there's no one on staff or no volunteer to quality control, if there's no one who can kind of check, what is the balance between, well, we could potentially reach 7 new people this Friday, but and so we went into these dilemmas, and we just went kind of back and forth. What's the pros, what's the cons, then had people talk about what is the potential like values that are being kind of that are like butting up against each other. So throughout the whole exercise, what we really built these dilemmas on was a common understanding of what are our organizational values. And we said, yeah, we said this nice exercise where we like write down everything you think the queer world should do, and then we kind of made people narrow it down to what are the 4 things we're going to be talking about today. And we always went back to kind of dignity and diversity and empathy. And it was just a good way to engage with the fact that you could use a chatbot in this example, and yes, you could potentially reach more people. Um, I won't get into it, sorry, but for every example, essentially, we realized that there was one value that would be reached, and there's one value that would maybe be hurt, and that is just what it is these days. There aren't these really simple kind of black white answers. So that was just my very, very quick story about what we did at Queer World. If you want more info, the organization is young, so they use Instagram. I'm too old for Instagram, but you can find Queer World on Instagram. And then otherwise, this is my excellent project leader, you, Helena Hansen. And this is the company that we have where we do this kind of policy making and governance stuff. So please, yeah, drop your stuff in the chat if you want to contact us. And otherwise, then I think we start with the question and answer, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lee. And yeah, if you want, you can also put the handles for your socials for Queer World in the chat so that everyone has like an easy way to find it.
Okay, handle sounded like something that I should know. Is that the little at sign? That's the little at sign.
Yeah, the
Okay,
ad
I just
sign.
told you I'm too old for this, Barbara. Too old for
Yeah,
Instagram. Okay.
it's okay. And yeah, I just want to say thank you both for your presentation. And I think you've given us a lot to think about, from questions of values, governance, bias, and also rights and lived experiences of young people in digital spaces. And I guess now I'd love to bring the conversation together and move into the more interactive discussion part. I want to explore some of the connections between your perspectives and ask you a few questions. And after that, we'll open it to the audience questions. So, to start us off, I wanted to first, I guess, address the question to Lee. I wanted to ask you, like, if you were to sum up and clarify, like, to say, in a concise way, like, why do you think LGBTQ communities experience AI differently, and why is that important?
Yeah, I mean, if I force us to kind of narrow things down, right? And I think we're kind of talking about generative AI, and we're kind of talking about chatbots more. That's kind of most of what we're talking about these days. And these are, most kind of AI chatbots use these large language models that are trained on huge data sets on the internet, right? And someone can correct me if you think I'm not being specific enough in the chat here. But when you think about like the nonsense on 4chan, for those of us who are old enough to remember 4chan, or Reddit, or even Facebook, like it's not hard to understand why chatbots are very, very consistently repeat racial and ethnic and religious and gendered and queer stereotypes. And of course, there are plenty of ways, there are good benchmarking methods you can find this and you can try to correct them. And some developers, like not Grok, right? But some developers work hard to prevent users from seeing such output. This is like what we call building in guardrails. But with generative AI, it's not possible to totally ensure that output will be fully okay. That's how these language language models were built. So I think, like Beckett said, that people are exposed to this, and queer people are exposed to this, and it's just a replication of what we're already exposed to. I mean, it's just more of the same. And so I think it's any kind of minority perspective or minority standing, you'll be able to see things a little bit quicker than someone in a maybe like a more pure, or not more pure, but a more like standard majority identity will be able to identify. What do you think, Beckett?
Yeah, I would 100% agree.
Becca, would you like to add anything to that, or should I go to the next question I have?
I think on that, maybe I would just add that, as I was touching upon very briefly earlier, the LGBTQ plus community has a very sensitive history with being categorized and labeled. And a lot of that is kind of at the core of how technologies like deep learning operate and the way we are perceived and whether that aligns or not with how we would like to describe ourselves. And things like, well, what does that label mean in one context versus another? What has been reclaimed? What is still a kind of a sore point? And that's very different for each individual person as well as the queer community as a whole. And that's, I think, one of why datafication of queer lives is sometimes such a uniquely sticky point.
Mm. So I guess also like a question to you now on a more practical note, also if we're talking to people from various nonprofits, so I wanted to ask if there is a nonprofit that doesn't have AI policy yet, and obviously dealing with limited resources like we all are, where would you say it should start?
I would say start by meeting the people you're serving where they're already at. I can guarantee that if there is a problem out there, people are already feeling it before you've even thought about it. So that kind of brings in theories of things like design justice and bringing the impacted people to help lead the table rather than just having them at that table. So I think it's Sasha Costanza-Chock wrote coming to an existing community table rather than trying to build a new table and then get people onto it.
Mhm. Lee, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I would have said like like sit together, like be come in community, and queer people are excellent at building community 'cause that's what we have to do. Same thing with international people, right? You have to build your network when you move somewhere. And I think thinking about what we want to do and what's important for us, that needs to be a kind of our I hate to use like the North Star, but that has to be what guides our behaviors in NGOs, like what we're actually trying to accomplish. And I think this does require some basic AI literacy, right? Just because there's so much hype. And handling like a machine learning algorithm could be a very different conversation than thinking about what's happening with like Copilot and chatbots. And that's totally fine. Like we're all clever enough to think about it, but we have to like carve out the time for ourselves and use the meeting places that we already have, which could just be the board meeting of these NGOs, right? Or the yearly meeting with members or something else. Or the Friday like, new topic, present a new thing meeting. I think we have these meeting spaces, like Becca said.
Mm. So I guess, yeah, like we mentioned, many NGOs are beginning to use or already using
Mhm.
AI and data-driven tools, also in their advocacy work. So here I wanted to ask more about this focus. Like, what would you say are the biggest pitfalls they should be aware of to make sure they can join being like up to date with new technologies, with also being critical enough to make sure it doesn't harm their mission? Beckett, would you
Yeah, I can go.
follow
I think
that?
one of the biggest pitfalls I've seen very well-meaning people fall into is trying to leverage something for the sake of it being new and shiny, rather than having a clear end goal in mind first, or trying to invent the question once you've already decided what you think the solution looks like almost like techno solutionism, but maybe in a more well-meaning way. And also, another thing is just making assumptions about communities, like making an assumption about all young people want this, or this, or all LGBT plus people want this, and this, or even something a bit more granular, like just saying, well, clearly all LGBTQ plus young people will think the same thing about this AI tool that we're making, and it's really never quite so simple as that.
Mhm.
Mhm. Lee, would you like to add anything to this question?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important point. Like we kind of wave AI around, we think it's a magic wand, but it's also, I mean, we're all doing the best we can, right? And people who work with NGOs, like there are people who are dedicated. You guys are dedicated to doing stuff and you're willing to not get paid very much for it, right? Comparatively speaking. So we are all trying to do our best with the resources we have. And it's hard to be the one in an organization maybe that's like, well, are we sure Copilot's going to save us time? Are we sure this like automatic meeting transcription is going to be a good thing? It is hard to be that person. But that's why I think being able to articulate what you want to do, like Beckett said, and then what maybe you don't want to happen is really important as well in these conversations because it's not, there is, I don't know if you saw one of like my favorite studies, like study names to teach on is this study that came from the Journal of Marketing, and they said like lower AI literacy predicts better AI receptivity. So companies might want to actually go for people who know less about AI. So like marketing does have something to do with this, right? And NGOs are consumers of Copilot. They're consumers of like platforms of cloud-based tools that use NGI as well. So it's not like we're immune from kind of people wanting to sell us things and telling us that it might do great stuff for us. But we have to be the kind of the critical consumers here.
Yeah. I really love that you mentioned like AI literacy here and how like the bigger AI literacy, sometimes even more like the AI skepticism is. And I think this is something we notice a lot in our work that
Mm,
the organizations who care to implement AI solutions, they're at the same time often very skeptical. And I guess the more you learn about it, the more you're aware of the risk, the more skeptical you are. But we also really like pointing the area in between the use AI for everything, AI hype, and the rejecting AI as the biggest harm. And I guess highlighting the work of all of the organizations who managed to locate the middle ground that's actually very can the best effects can come from.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I guess that kind of leads me to the next question that I have, which is we did talk about the dangers and the risks of AI, and I guess how it can negatively impact LGBTQ people in distinct ways than other marginalized communities even. But to lead it to like a more positive note, I wanted to ask if you have places that you see AI genuinely helping LGBTQ people, whether it's accessing information, support, or community. Yeah, and I guess I can pass it to Beckett first.
Yeah, sure. I think coming from the perspective of someone who works with youth, I don't think it's probably appropriate for me to like, name a product or service right now, and then we all go to it, and it might change tomorrow, and it's suddenly bad. But I think it's about maximizing opportunities for young queer people's rights, or any queer people's rights really, while also mitigating the risks to those same rights. So when I work with youth, queer youth have a disproportionate reliance on the online world, right, to seek that information and community that they often lack offline, which means they're increasingly coming into contact with AI services. How can we support that access to information, that freedom of expression, that right to their own culture, and so on, while minimizing the risks to their safety, privacy, etc.? AI might well be used by the next generation of queer folks to define their own ways of living and being in a very digital era, rather than being confined and constrained by those current patterns and labels I was talking about. And that's me speculating by saying that. But I think, like you were just saying, I'm not going to call it an exactly middle ground, but there's a difference between taking a very polar position and taking a more critical and informed approach, which is somewhere in between. It's more of a spectrum, I would say, than three separate points. But
Mm.
you do have to engage with what AI is in order to understand that. Like, it's not all AI is ChatGPT or all AI is the data center they just installed that's polluting my local environment. There are other things, and what we call AI now is very nebulous and covers a lot of
Mm.
things. But I think what's clear and less nebulous is that where AI does have a potential role, there is a lot of work already out there, like the Children in AI Design Code that I mentioned, like the standards to ensure that AI interacting with vulnerable groups respects their rights by design and default. And I think that's a beautiful thing that we can kind of work together on and put into practice more going forward.
Mm. Thank you so much. And yeah, I guess we do have any insights also on that, on the positive, well, like possible prospects of what AI can offer queer folks that we can see hope in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good opportunity to stop and to kind of be really intentional about what we want, right? And I think young people are better at doing this, maybe. And now, Becca, like I don't work so much with youth. I was like born 55-year-old. But I think that what I hear about with young people is that they're more willing to say like, no, I don't want this. Like I talk to students, for example, and people, job seekers, and they seem much more able to articulate like, no, I'm not gonna do this AI interview. I'm not gonna do this thing. I'm not gonna, right? So I think this ability to say no is also maybe a bit an ability that we're learning with AI because it's being pushed. So that could be kind of a really interesting like flip side. These things are getting pushed on us, and so people are maybe getting like growing the ability to say like I want this instead, or maybe or yes, this is what I want, but if you can do A, B, and C, if my data is saved, if if my data is protected, if this data center isn't polluting, if. So maybe it's kind of unintentionally opening up like helping us practice be yeah, maybe more democratic kind of decision making, maybe.
Mm. Thank you so much. And I guess I will have my last question because I open the floor to our audience question. And it is, what would you say nonprofits should be doing today to ensure that AI serves their communities? And we can also go with Lee first.
Yeah. I think, I mean, as Beckett knows what is like the design materials that are out there, and I think this shows that we know, like, our communities know what's important to us, right? And like not just a queer community, but any community that you're a member of, you know what's important to you. Like we know our values, and we all have really important knowledge, right? Like really important historical knowledge, and that's not what AI developers always have. Obviously, right? AI developers are a specific type of like job you can have, and like that's where I came from. And so I think it's up to us to share this knowledge and to make it clear what our communities need to thrive, right? Like the demands that we put on the world, how we want to see things. Um, so if you wanted to, not to use techno solutionist term, but if you want to think about AI as like a very, very, very complicated data processing, and then fine, we have like the data about our communities. And this is an incredibly important resource, right? And we need to know how to articulate it. So I think at the end of the day, AI being widespread is actually showing us just how important being in community is. which is great, which is really great because I think that's what will build kind of like a stronger world actually.
Mm, thank you. And Beckett, would you like to add anything, or can I?
Yeah, I think just building upon that about the importance of values and staying true to your values, because at the end of the day, a lot of NGOs and nonprofits are built because a lot of people want to band together around something they believe very strongly, and um, I think that means being purposeful in your use of any kind of technology. I mean, sometimes the way you're already doing things might well be good enough, and sometimes you might see a way that you need to improve. And can this technology help you? That's a good question to explore. But equally, focus on what you're doing well instead of where all your gaps are.
Mm.
Because equally part of continuing and being sustainable as a nonprofit is maintaining what already works. It's maintaining the networks and the systems that you've set up and already got in place that are doing good. Yes, enhance, but enhancement without maintenance is almost like just chasing the next cool thing on the horizon. Um, so you owe it to yourself to kind of pat yourself on the back for what you've done so far as well. Yes, there's some way to go, and sometimes technology can help us with that, but don't lose sight of what your value was at the end of the day and who you're serving.
Mm. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for that part. And now I wanna open the floor to all of your questions. If you wanna, you can either use the chat option or raise your hand. And yeah, okay. So Bernard is first. Bernard, you can go and ask your question.
Barbara, you asked already all the intelligent questions. So I have to come in with the dumber one. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and also the conversation. I'm leading a social organization focusing on children from extreme poverty. So it's all about marginalization in different levels. So we deal with also multiple marginalization, and some of our children and youngsters have also this one, and including queerness. So I have a practical question and a more visionary one. The practical question is more Beckett. I've never heard about this design justice, but that's actually quite interesting for us because we are doing a lot of research and we don't understand the bias because we're not experts in that. Is this design codes, or is there any kind of filter which we can use to get, let's say, more unbiased results? Is there anything which we can do in using this kind of design code? So this was the first question. So can we do something with that? The second question is maybe to both of you. We're having at the moment a project where we look into the year 2035 and think about the life world of children and youngsters from marginalized communities. How will it look like? And I'm leading the group on digital space and AI. So what comes out, for example, is that there will be a hybrid world, and there's no digital world and the real world, but it's really the identity will just meld both of these worlds. And the second thing is also that AI literacy makes the difference. It's the watershed. So it's either when you're not literate, then you're exposed, and when you're literate, then you can shape. So let's make it very shortly. My question is now related to queer people from, let's say, in principle, as marginalized society. So what kind of skills or what kind of yeah, that's his skills. Supporting environment a queer person will need in 2035. So how will that develop? And do you have a vision? And maybe even a wish for an NGO is working in that, then please be careful, take attention of this or this. So as concrete as possible, please.
Yeah, so I can start on the technical side first, perhaps. Um, I think it's very important that we establish that there are organizations who develop these systems and there are organizations who deploy these systems. And more often than not, NGOs fall into the deploying part. So they have less ability to kind of steer the specific design decisions, like what data sets are we using? How do I know the provenance of this data? How do I know people were compensated fairly for it? How do I know that biases have been mitigated to the extent possible? Um, that unfortunately does put procurement teams on a back foot, but that doesn't mean there's nothing they can do. So I'm happy to, I've just been looking up the links in the background. I will drop a link to the Children AI Design Code in this Zoom chat because that contains things for developers and deployers. Also, I can drop a link to the Design Justice ebook by Sasha Kostanzachok, which she has very kindly made freely available online. So I think those are both excellent starting places to kind of learn about the kinds of skills that not only procurement teams need, but also a bit on your second point, what skills the service users can gain from coming to these tables and doing this work and fulfilling their needs. And then the other half is how do you tangibly, I guess, set up those processes and what can you do physically in your role right now, even though you're not the person who designed a system. And I will shut up now and go grab those links.
Thank you so much, both to Bernard for your questions and Becca to your answer. And I wanted to ask if there's anyone else who has a question. I saw in the
My
chat.
question, Barbara, on 2035 would be interesting. So
Oh, okay. Would you, Becca, like to
hear from
add
Lee as
anything?
well. So what do you
Oh,
think about,
hear
yeah.
from me on that question too? Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that you're asking, Bernard. But I think I would ask the people you're working with, ask these marginalized youth,
We
because I think
do. We
yeah,
do.
yeah, good, yeah. And I can't, I'm not even kidding. I was born in 55, so I'm not a
Mhm.
youth. You can't ask me. But yeah, but then so I think what do they say? Because I think they're the ones, they're the ones. It's their future that that they get to make. What do they say?
Well, they don't have a clear picture about 2035. I mean, they have a clear picture about the present and maybe the next 2, 3 years, and that's fine. So I think we as an organization have a bigger responsibility to look a bit further and see how it will develop because it also helps us to build organizational capacity or capability around that. This is the reason why I'm just looking a bit in future and then work backwards. And then we meet, of course. Yeah. Of course, involvement and participation and getting feedback is important. So do you have any kind of ideas of what will be a very important ingredient needed in 2035?
I think some of it will be kind of the same things that the queer community has been needing for decades, if not centuries, which is there's that core human need to be seen and valued and to be able to
Mhm.
connect with other people like yourself, but also to be able to feel authentic. And I think that's interesting when we talk about artificial intelligence, especially generative AI, where the machine is increasingly able to output text that can seem authentic but is a bit uncanny valley when you dig into it or a bit unreliable. So I think finding ways to keep the human connection and the human solidarity and community, no matter how much AI we might be using or not, I think it's important that no matter what that percentage of AI that we're using is, we don't completely abandon the human.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
Thank you. And also, yeah, for those of you who might be interested, the resources Beckett sent are available in the chat. And I wanted to, I guess I saw that Lee mentioned that Sabrina might tell us more about what she's doing, which I don't know if she wants to, but we can also like open the floor to that unless someone else has a question right now. Um, Okay, and I think we have another question. It's from I'm gonna mispronounce your name, so I think I'm gonna just ask you to unmute it if you could say your name. I'm so sorry about that. Uh,
Hi, my name is Hyun, and I think you had the right. I kind of heard the right start. So yeah. So my question is, I'm a queer AI engineer. So I am a queer person and an AI engineer at the same time. So it's kind of like what I like try to do in my work is like be purposeful and sort of like channel my frustrations into like what I'm making. And before I like start my question, I also want to say that like sometimes like I study AI, but like I don't particularly feel safe like using commercial AI models. Like for example, I am a woman. It if I'm like talking to a commercial chatbot, it here I input that like I study AI and ML. I have like experiences like math research, and like it just like fills in my gender as a man. And if I correct it, then it goes back and apologizes, and it goes like right back into those bias tropes. And so this is a problem that's like that applies to me as well. And what I became interested in is like offline AI models, like
Hmm.
being offline. Like it means that like the data doesn't get shared into a public cloud and is going to like stay in like whatever device is being trained in, and also like privacy preserving AI. So I I sort of wanted to like I was curious about like what kind of like interests like if like NGOs or non if NGOs like might be interested in like adopting offline AI models or kind of like applying privacy preserving technology
Hmm.
on like existing AI services or kind of like configuring new services based on that.
I
Um,
think,
oh yeah,
oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
I just wanted to pass the question, so you can just go for it.
When I talk to NGOs, Cheyenne, I think you're way ahead. That most people are not lucky enough to have a queer AI engineer like you. Even though I think you're right, like edge computing and kind of small language models, offline stuff. That's very clever. It's a very reasonable way to go. But I think that a lot of NGOs are still in the kind of okay, how can we just do what we need to do as fast as possible? Like read through, like deliver a 7-page report to the latest politician that want to ask about whether or not gender affirming care should be covered by even the national healthcare system, right? Or just like sending in like funding reports or helping get through kind of people, job applications. I think it's a lot of like this, the work that's just seen as the work that's like seen. It seems like administrative work, like getting in between an NGO and kind of the people they want to help, and I think that's those are like the activities that people are trying to kind of get, to not do or to automate or just to get some help on. That wasn't really what you asked, but that's like where I see the kind of the problems, like the desire to just use any tools as po possible. What do you think, Beckett?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we see in kind of white papers and reports and all that grey literature coming out of NGOs is that increasingly I think people are waking up to the fact that they can demand better out of the things they want. Like, yes, I want the system to be able to help me do this stuff, but I don't think you should get to kind of exploit me as a human person. And even more broadly than AI, I think a lot of people, it's really coming to a head that people are almost fed up with the way I think the tech industry in particular has this sort of control over what you are offered, but at the same time does not meet your needs. And I know that because I work in children's rights, we see an awful lot of people like suing companies at the moment, technology companies, because of design features that are harmful to children. And I think, you know, I also see when I go online as a queer person, people are starting to really organize around demanding better for queer people from moderation systems, from the apps that they use, from even things as almost innocuous as dating services. I think people realize that they have this collective, almost fed up need. So I think, yes, we are at this very strange, almost turning point where there is a lot more demand for, okay, I want you to help me, but I want you to help me on my terms and not just exploit my need, that kind of thing. So I think, yeah, you are in the right place. And I appreciate that it is very, very difficult to be a queer AI engineer. I have been there previously before I worked at an NGO. I think, you know, this is a bit tangential, but Five Rights Foundation was founded by Baroness Kidron in the UK, and one of the favorite things she's ever said to me is, sometimes you need revolution takes two parts. It takes people fighting the system, and it takes people within the system kind of taking it apart and putting it back together. And it sounds to me like you're inside that system, making that change that's needed.
Thank you. This was a really good answer, I think. And yeah, I wanted to check if anyone else has a question or if there's like any follow-up on that topic.
If nobody had like if the floor is open, I just wanted to
go
say
for
that
it.
like building offline systems and like looking into privacy preserving technology is sort of like my way of taking control over like what AI technology has to offer slash
Cool.
kind of like if you like have control over the data pipeline, like then like you have a lot more freedom over like what kind of like guardrails to install or like what like you can like prevent like the system from inputting or like there's also like techniques to like actually like do detox on the output or force it to like forget certain outcomes. So I think it's like sort of way to empower myself. And like before I went to AI, like I think like I kind of like went the opposite way because like before I went into AI/ML, like I came from a public policy background and like kind of like made the opposite switch. And that like the reason I like made that kind of change was because I wanted to like deliver like more direct impact and like have insight into like how those things are happening.
Yeah, and it's a great plunge to take, and I'm like super happy to hear that there are people like you doing that work. I think what you're touching on, it reminded me a little of a paper that, well, a preprint that I can also share in the chat. It's called like Resisting, Refusing, Reclaiming, Reimagining. And it's about just the general public, not specifically queer people or anything like that, but the way that AI can be outright refused or resisted, or it can be reclaimed and reimagined. And I think both have a role to play in making sure that whatever AI is in our future is far more responsible and sensitive to our needs. And that does include things like privacy enhancing technologies, and it does include things like, I don't know, federated learning, offline learning, that kind of stuff.
Hey, thank you. And I think we need to wrap it up right now. So unless there's a very pressing last minute question, I'm gonna start wrapping it up. I just wanted to very quickly, because we don't have much time, ask both of you, Beckett and Lee, for like one key takeaway if you had to like make sure people remember one thing from this event. Beckett, maybe you want to go first.
Yeah, I think even in an age where people feel like tech or AI is inevitable, it's not. We're just taught that it is because that makes it easier for people to put it in our lives in ways that we're not necessarily comfortable with. And I think just remembering that you have power. Either you have power because you're in an NGO and you have a position where you make change and that's your job to make change. Either you have power because you have lived experience and you know what it is like to be you and what your needs are for systems, and you can leverage that voice. Or maybe a mix of both, or maybe you're an expert in working with a specific community and you're really good at bringing their voices to the table. I think the end thing that I'm trying to get at here is there's something everyone can do, and it doesn't have to be throwing out all technology forever. It's how do you make technology work in a way that you are comfortable with.
And Lee, do you add
Yeah,
something?
no, I couldn't have said it any better. That was great, Beckett. We really do have like a lot of concrete tools to help NGOs act really thoughtfully, right? Beckett gave some links about justice design. We have like participatory co-design guides, and we have bias evaluation methods. We have fairness audits. We do have a lot more tools, and I think we just when we get together, that's when we kind of share them and talk about them. So I think I get hope from like these kind of meetings and just meeting with each other. So. There, maybe that's what I have to offer to your questions. Like, what do we see 2035 being? It's being together and like sharing our knowledge and what we have, because yeah, that's when we have the future that I am looking forward to.
Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you so much in general to both of you, to Beckett and Lee for all of your thoughtful insights and for taking your time to share your expertise and perspectives. And also, I wanted to thank you to our audience for coming here today, even though I'm sure, you guys are struggling with the heat. So I really appreciate so many of you staying until the very end. I think it shows that even though this topic is still niche, the people who care about it, they care about it a lot. And I think that's something that we're excited to see. We talked a bit before that maybe the relation between AI and LGBTQ issues is not very obvious to people right now, but we think that it's gonna be becoming more and more relevant in the coming months. So congrats you guys for being here because you're ahead of the curve by being interested.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, thank you for like showing up, I guess, to like a celebrating Pride event also, which is really important to us. I will send you a feedback form in the chat here, and I would really love to ask you to spend this minute or two, I swear it doesn't take longer than that, to just mark your thoughts on the event. It is, I guess, like a way for us to make sure we can make it even better each time. And will really, really mean a lot. So please do it. And I guess thank you so much, and hope you stay tuned with our future events. I will also I will send a follow-up message that you can follow us on socials and stay in touch with what Lee and Beckett are doing. And thank you so much. Hope you found today's discussion insightful, and we look forward to welcoming you to another of our events in the future.